Good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you. Well, today is the last show of 2020. And if you're like me, and I know that you are, this has been a year that we want to say goodbye to and move into a fresh new year, 2021. I wanted to end this year with a follow-up to some of the shows that I'd done the last couple of weeks. Last week in particular, Johnny Lloyd was my guest, and we did a show that we titled We're Still Here. And it was a show that pretty much was about, we are not in control. And I just wanted to establish that last week. And as I move into the show this week, let me just pick up with we're not in control, but there's certain things that once we accept that, we can do so that we can end up having a good life. Today's show is called Stevie, You're the Man of the House Now. Episode 202, Right Thinking with Steve Copeland, is very pleased to announce that this week's show is called Stevie, You're the Man of the House Now. Tune in and hear Steve offer words of encouragement about being dealt a difficult hand in life, but picking yourself up and becoming a success. We can all have a good life if we just believe and never give up. Well, I'm Stevie. A lot of you know me as Steve, but I'm Stevie. And what I wanted to do today is close out the year with a note of optimism. And I put a lot of time trying to meditate on how I was going to deliver today's message. Today's message is real simple. If we've been given some very, very difficult circumstances in our lives, things that we didn't ask for, we can still have a wonderful life, make a difference with other people, and just be here to make contributions and be a worthwhile member of society. That's kind of similar to what I always talk about with Right Thinking Foundation, that this show is dedicated, Right Thinking with Steve Copeland, to people that are going through hardship and those that want to be there to help them. Well, probably most of you that listen to this show are people that want to make a difference, people that may be going through hard times, but you're listening to this show because you're relating somehow to what I do. My wife and I, we talked a great deal this week about people that speak, people that speak publicly, people that write books, people that want to deliver messages, people that feel that they have a voice and they want to use it. Well, I'm one of those people, and probably most of you that are listening are also. But some of you that are listening may still not be quite to where you're ready to let go of the past and know that circumstances do not define who you are. So I just want to just start right now, and I've got a whole lot of resources that I've prepared today that I think that you're going to enjoy. So just relax and let me just sort of start telling you some of my stories with the sole intent to let you know that I'm a work in progress. I'm not where I'm supposed to be yet. And some of that's going to come out in today's show. But I just hope that I can give you encouragement to know that you can be who you dream about, who you want to be, no matter how long it might take you, if you just believe. So let me just kind of get started with take you back into some of my life, and hopefully you'll be able to relate to it. So when I was 7 years old, I came out into the living room, and we had this big living room chair that was against the wall, and the door would open almost toward the chair. And then there was a couch. And my mother and my sister was 4 years older. She was 11. I was 7, second grade for me. My mother and my sister were sitting on the couch, just hugging each other, and they were crying. And I was sitting in this chair. I didn't know what was going on. And then my father came out of the bedroom, and he had 2 suitcases in his hand, and he set them down right in front of the chair where I was sitting in front of the door. And then he walked back into the bedroom, and I totally didn't know what was going on. And then he came out again, and I said, "What are you doing, Dad? What's going on?" And he didn't answer me, but my mother did. She was pretty much hysterical, crying. And she said, "Stevie, your father's leaving us." And then my father, he went over and kissed my sister. Then he kissed me, and he said goodbye, and he walked out the door. I had no idea that this was going to happen. I had no idea what was going on. But as soon as he left, my mother said, Stevie, you're the man of the house now. Last week, when Johnny Lloyd and I were doing the show, she made a comment that was exactly what I'm trying to talk about, what's going to unfold in today's show. She said that sometimes our history unwraps our destiny. That moment that I just shared with you, where my mother said, Stevie, you're the man of the house now, that set my life in motion in a certain direction. My mother being a loving, wonderful person, but she was very, very, she could get hysterical sometimes. And it put an awful lot of, I'll say, pressure or stress on my older sister, because she was a lot older and could communicate with my mother about things that I wasn't involved in. And so, but when my mother said that to me, I accepted it. I became the man of the house at 7 years old. I started feeling responsible for other people, for my mother, for my sister. And, you know, I wasn't quite as big a person as I might have thought I was, I guess, but I sat at the head of the table. And from that moment on, my life was a life of accepting responsibility, even though things weren't what you asked for. My father moved out of state, and my whole childhood, from 7 years old, second grade, till my early teenage years, the divorce decree between my mother and my father required me to go on a bus 3 times a year, spring vacation, the week off of school, which was called Easter vacation generally, Christmas vacation, and 3 weeks in the summer. And my sister went with me most of the time in the early couple of years, but then as she got more involved in her high school activities, she had lots of reasons why she didn't go sometimes. She was doing some really good things in an organization at the temple that she got real involved in called USY, United Synagogue Youth. But I wasn't involved in that. So my life was that my mother, from the time that I was 7 years old when this happened, my mother became a sales girl at Lerner's department store, which later became New York and Company. And she was the most incredible salesperson in the whole wide world. They had layaway contests to where people that were shopping, if they wanted to buy something and put it on what they called layaway, just put it aside and pay on it like a weekly or a monthly payment or something, they could get their merchandise later. It was kind of like a savings plan to buy things. And my mother would get points in the contest that the company would have to, if you put enough, every time you got somebody on layaway, you would get points, and then the points would accumulate, and then you could get merchandise yourself. And so my mother and my sister, when I was young, they looked a lot alike. They wore the same sizes. They wore the same size clothes. And my mother, she had every sweater that they sold in that store. She had dressers in her bedroom that were nothing but just brand new sweaters. And my mother taught me so much about how to relate and to connect with people. And it was just wonderful. I mean, I dedicated my book that just came out last week, December 22nd, actually, like a week and a half ago. I dedicated it to my mother. I dedicated my curriculum that's in prisons and jail systems throughout the country to my mother, because my mother taught me so much about life. And in my book, I've read this before, but I share this. My dedication is very, very simple. And it says, I'm going to turn to it right now and read it. It says, I dedicate this book to my mother, Rose. She taught me how to love. She was the original, never met a stranger, and give you the shirt off her back person. She passed these on to me. Well, those early years when my mother was a sales girl, and I've told everyone many times on the show especially that my mother was an 11th grade high school dropout. But she was just a person that taught me so much about common sense, human nature. And And I got exposed to many, many things that other people thought were very hard for a child. I rode that bus, the Trailways bus, up to Washington, D.C. to visit my father on those 3 times a year that I had to visit him. And many times went by myself, as I told you. And, I was one of those kids. My mother would take off for an hour, go over to the bus station, put me on the bus, introduce me to the bus driver, and ask him to watch out for me. And the bus would take 5.5 hours from Norfolk, Virginia to D.C. bus station back then. And my mother was very sad to put me on the bus. She thought she worried for my safety. And many times it was a lot of strange things happened. The D.C. bus station, the bus would get in at 3 o'clock. My father would not take off work until, he got off at 5 o'clock, 4:30 or 5, and he picked me up at the bus station around 5:30. And my mother got into many, many fights with my dad because she said, why can't you take off to pick up your son? He's 8 years old, 9 years old, however old I was. He shouldn't be left alone in the downtown D.C. bus station. But my dad never took off. And I can go into a whole lot of these stories, and I'm doing them for a reason. Hey, for me, I got through it. I was out on my own at a very early age. I developed a certain type of a independence, a personality. I was the man of the house, but I was also a latchkey kid. And what that meant was that my mother was working. I came home after school to be by myself. My sister, she was 4 years older, so she went to different school after a while there. She was in junior high school, then high school, and I was in elementary school, and I had unlimited freedom. And I wasn't always so nice to my sister because she did try to watch over me sometimes, and I would rebel and say, well, you're not my mother. I don't have to do what you say. And so, I've done a lot of things that I'm not so proud of, but nevertheless, I got all these stories where life was not so easy. We were kind of poor. My mother, she did the best she could. She walked to the bus line, 15-minute walk from Full Street and our house up to Grammy Street, caught the bus. Weekends, I would go to work with her and just hang out downtown all the time. And she was in a community of other people that she knew that worked in the downtown stores. And I was allowed to just go out on the streets and go from one store to another and do what I wanted to. But the rule was every hour on the hour, I had to go to someone in the store that my mother knew, and they would go to a telephone and say, Stevie's with me. If I didn't check in with her once on the hour, I got disciplined for not checking in on her because she would be worried about me. One of my favorite things that I ever did that formed my personality to be who I am, there was a store called Smith & Welton's, and they had what they call a tea room that was a mezzanine that you could overlook the downstairs and watch people shop. So when I was up there, there was a bookstore that was there, and they had every single pocket-back edition of Mad Magazine books. And I'm a Mad Magazine guy from the word go. I love the humor, but I read every single one of those. I could take one, sit down in a chair up there for an hour or two and just read these paperback Mad Magazine books. And all of y'all have been exposed to my personality that's sometimes perhaps a little off the wall, and I'm sorry. But nevertheless, those are my early years, being downtown, meeting a lot of people, being by myself. So I learned a certain kind of independence. And but at the same time, I wouldn't have called myself rebellious. I just called myself independent. My father would come into town a couple times a year when I saw him for holidays. We were Jewish, and but the thing was that one of my aunts would call me and invite me over to dinner. Say, your dad's coming to town. We'd like to come over for dinner, and I felt very left out. My dad didn't tell me that. My aunts would invite me, which was a nice thing. And I became very close to some of those aunts later in life. And I just want to fast forward. I became very, very close to my father, but it took years and years. There was one stretch where I didn't go in his house for 20 straight years. There was once when I was up at his house when I was a teenager, and I stopped on the highway to call him and just wanted to talk to him. And he said, what is it you want of me? And I said, I just want to have a relationship. And he said, well, there's not really much I can do, Steve. So I'm talking to everyone right now just to share. We always don't have a perfect home life. We don't always have everything the way that most people would like your life to look. I remember once I had a teacher in elementary school named Ms. Hilton. I think she was my fifth grade teacher. And when I was in my early 20s, once I caught the bus to go to D.C. I didn't have a car at the time, and I rode a bus to D.C. to visit my dad, I think, and voluntarily, I might add. I wasn't required at that point in my life. And I sat next to Mrs. Hilton, and I hadn't seen her for like 10 or 15 years. And it was just a wonderful thing. She was a wonderful teacher. And she confided in me that she was so glad that I turned out good. By that time, I was in college studying accounting, and I worked a lot, and I was doing well. But she said that she was so worried about me coming from a divorced family the way that I did. And she knew that my mother worked hard and my father was out of state. She was very concerned about me. Well, I appreciated that. My mother taught me how to be polite, so I had an awful lot of people cared about me, which was a good thing. I wasn't faking it. I really was sincerely polite and liked doing things for people. When I was in high school, I partied a great deal. Like I say, I was a latchkey kid. I was out on the streets, and I had full independence. I started working at a very young age. I started weeding people's gardens when I was a elementary school kid for money. I would walk blocks and blocks across town to weed gardens. I'd take my transistor radio with me and put it there and work in the yard all day. I learned how to work. My work ethic was terrific. In fact, one time when I was 12 years old, 13, getting ready to be bar mitzvahed, my father came into town, and it was kind of a ritual. He'd come in town like on a Friday, leave on a Sunday, and I'd have to spend as much time as he asked me to, and I didn't want to. My mother told me I had to. It was just give up whatever I was planning on doing and, be respectful to my dad. She really pushed me to be respectful of my dad, even though I didn't want to be. One other thing with my dad, he required me. I got a $2 a week allowance back then, and but he paid me every 2 weeks, not every week. So I would get $4 in an envelope in the mail. But the rule was I had to write a letter to my father. And we're talking about a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid here. I had to write a letter to my father. And if he didn't get the letter before it was time to mail the allowance to me, I lost it for those 2 weeks. And I didn't always get him the letter on time. And then long distance was different back then. It cost money to make a long distance phone call. My mother didn't have money to let me be making long distance phone calls. But every now and then I would ask my mother to, can I call Dad long distance because I didn't get the letter written in time and I'm not going to get my allowance. And my mother, she didn't like that, but she would let me sometimes. Well, that didn't last too long. My dad said he's not going to accept a phone call in lieu of a letter. So I had to learn that if I didn't do what I was supposed to do timely, I suffered. And so I didn't like that lesson. And then when I was about 11, maybe 12, I wrote my father a letter after he didn't give me an allowance for the last 2 weeks. And I, as politely as I could, said, "Dear Dad, I just want to let you know that this is the last letter you're ever going to get from me because I do not like being forced to write you a letter to get my allowance. So I've made a decision that I'm going to sacrifice not receiving an allowance from you anymore because I don't want to be forced to do it. I have no problem with writing you a letter every now and then, but I don't want to be required to do it." Well, my father called my mother and just lashed her up and down for this. And my mother didn't know I'd written that letter. And but she said, I kind of understand, but that might not have been the right thing to do, Stevie. Well, so I never wrote my father another letter for allowance after that. We had a lot of times like this. But this time when I was 12 years old, my father came in, and on Sunday morning he came in. I came out of the house, sat in his car at the driveway. Now, how many of you that are involved in a divorced family, yourselves, or when you were growing up, perhaps, or maybe you're divorced from your spouse right now? I can tell you this, that, we know the percentages. It's probably more people go through divorce than don't go through divorce in the marriages now. And it's not good. it's not good for the children. And it's just their children are affected their whole lives by it. They're affected because they want to model their own way that they raise their children based on, I don't want it to be like it was when I was a kid. Some of them, they never learned the right way to, they were never loved in the right way. So it was never modeled. So they don't know how to do it. I was just fortunate though, that my mother, she really taught me love. And my father tried to teach me just responsibility. So we're sitting in the car on this Sunday morning, and my father said to me, now, I guess I was 13 because I had a paper route. I had a paper route for 3 years in there. And, get up in the morning at 4:30 and go pick up the papers and deliver them and go collect, nights and things. And, it was a job. Did very well at it. I won every sales record there was and got my first trip out of the country by winning a paperboy contest where I got new subscriptions and got to go to Windsor, Canada, go up to Detroit. And there was 120 paperboys that won the trip. And I was the number one winner. I doubled the person in second place, even after I donated points to a young boy that lived on my paper route that was a paper boy, but he didn't know how to sell and he didn't get very many points. So I donated a trip to him. And then we did this 26-hour train ride up to Detroit with 118 other paper boys. And everywhere we went, Ford Motor Company, different places, little Stevie got taken up on the stage and introduced as the number one salesperson for the Virginian Pilot newspaper company out of Norfolk, Virginia. It was good. But I was in the car with my father that day, and he said, Stevie, what are you going to do? Do you plan to go to college? And I said, I haven't really thought about it too much. I mean, I guess so. That's what most people do. I guess when they graduate high school, they go to college. And he goes, well, you need to start thinking about it. And I said, okay, I guess I'm going to go to college. And he said, no, that's not what I mean. You need to start thinking about how you're going to pay for it, because I'm telling you now and giving you plenty of notice that I'm not going to be able to help you pay for your college education. And I said, why? And he said, well, just because, my second wife doesn't really want me spending much money. He used her as an excuse a great deal. I lost a lot of respect for that. But bottom line is, he told me when I was just turned 13 years old that he's not going to be able to help me with my college education. And he said, I'm telling you now so you can start saving money, and I think you should get a second paper route. I said, a second paper route? I mean, I already have one paper route. He goes, yeah, but other people they might just be able to have only one paper route, but you can have two. There's nothing wrong with you working that hard and having two. Well, I ended up with a phenomenal work ethic, and I thank my dad for that. The way that he hit me with it might not have been to my liking when I was early, but my dad and we got really, really close when he was about 80 years old. When I was in when I got diagnosed with my cancer, my multiple myeloma, I was 51, I remember. And at that point in his life, we got really, really close. He said a lot of things to me, a lot of apologies for many things in life, asked me to forgive him. I did. And he called me. And I remember when I first got diagnosed with my multiple myeloma and given five years to live, he talked to me almost every single day for about the first 6 months to sort of help me talk about it, face up to it and stuff. And I was pretty good with it. I was accepting, and fortunately, I was coming close to the Lord and could move forward with my life. But the bottom line that I'm sharing with you is, how many of you have a life where you were dealt a hand that was really lousy? And, show of hands out there, probably everybody, probably every one of us has something that was really not the way we wanted it. If you grew up with a silver spoon, that's one thing. I actually, because of all of the experiences that I had being with so much freedom at a young age, the DC bus station was a very difficult thing, but I learned something there that was an incredible life skill. I introduced myself to the people that ran the newsstand where they sold newspapers and candy bars and cigarettes and so forth. And my dad had given me that suggestion. He said, just introduce yourself to the people at the newsstand and see if they'll let you hold your suitcase behind the counter so that you can have a little more freedom and not have to be watching your suitcase until I get there. So I did. I introduced myself to people behind the newsstand. They let me keep my suitcase behind there. And I later used that technique when I hitchhiked to the Mardi Gras when I was in college. And I had a backpack kind of thing, a duffel bag with me that I had hitchhiked with. And I went to this parking lot where there was this man that was selling ice cold beer, red striped cold beer, and black beans. And so I got there in the morning from hitchhiking for a day or so, and man locked my stuff in the trunk of the car. He was working. He told me I'd be back. The newsstand people said, you got to be back before 5, though, because we have a change of shift in the D.C. bus station, and the next people won't know you. So I'd always have to get back at 5 o'clock to claim my suitcase. And then I could have freedom to wander around the bus station and so forth. And I will say this is an ugly, ugly, sad, awful thing to tell you. But, I'm young, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. The D.C. bus station's not a very fun place to be. And I'd have to go to the restroom. So I'd go down. And I remember they have this basement restroom, and it's like a football stadium where they got like troughs for you to go down there too. But it was really a bad place. And I would go down there, and every single time I remember going there, there'd be some person would come over to me and say things to me, that were really, really not nice. I came through that okay. I never had anything ever happen, but it was bad to be, propositioned by unsavory people. I won't call them anything worse than that right now. But the point was, it upset my mom so much that I would tell her about my experiences. And so she just never could get over my dad wouldn't take off work. Why? I guess he was just trying to teach me life, responsibility, fend for myself. And I was a good student. I've done a lot of things in my life, and I learned to take care of other people. And I got an awful lot of training along the way to protect myself and to defend other people. And because I was out there by myself in bad situations, I learned to help other people when I saw that they might be in a bad situation. And so that's part of my personality. To come back with what Johnny said, our history unwraps our destiny. My mother said, Stevie, you're the man of the house. And from that moment on, I was a person that accepted responsibility and took care of a lot of things. I intervened on behalf of many, many people. And look at what I do now. I love being in prisons and working with people that are still trying to work it out, show them the love that they need so that they can figure out their own lives and move on with it. And so I want to offer a couple things to you right now. First of all, the Napoleon Hill Foundation is one of my lifetime closest contacts. I've said many times and publicly and on broadcast that the 3 most influential books that have affected my life have been, number 1, the Bible, number 2, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and number 3, Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. And so I was very, very fortunate. I tell the story of Bill the Plant Man that when I was about 22, 3 years old, I met a man that was traveling up from Florida in an 18-wheeler, sold plants, would rent space at a Thomas Corner Exxon gas station and sell house plants off the back of the truck for $20 a piece. And I met him buying some plants for a new apartment that I got. And in the conversation, he said, hey, Steve, you want to grab a bite to eat, like when I get off work tonight? So we had Chinese food, and he presented me with my first copy of the book, Think and Grow Rich. And I've had a lifetime relationship with Napoleon Hill, the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Don Green, the executive director, is just one of my closest friends that I admire. And I want to share a couple things right now. First of all, I get Napoleon Hill's Thought for the Day every day. It comes in. It's a free subscription. I highly recommend it. Just Google naphill.org and find Thought for the Day and get it sent to you on an email. And every day I wake up and I pray and then I open up my phone and I read the Thought for the Day. And I get some of the most positive life lessons and encouragement imaginable. And I've been doing this for years. I want to read one right this second that relates to today's conversation. This is the Thought for the Day from a couple weeks ago. And when I get ones that I really like, I forward them on to myself a second time and I put the number of the show that I want to read it on, and that's what I did to stay organized so I could pull this one out of the many that I read. If you start at the top, you can move in only one direction, downward. Perhaps the worst thing that might have happened to you would be to have been born with the proverbial silver spoon in your mouth. For had you been born into privilege, you would have been deprived of one of the world's greatest gifts, the opportunity to reach the highest levels of success of which you are capable, solely on the basis of your own merit. If you were born with less than most, don't resent others who seem to have more advantages. In truth, the real advantage is yours, for you will develop the self-confidence that comes only from meeting life's challenges on your own terms. As you progress, you gain the strength and knowledge necessary to assure your enduring success, things that cannot be given to you but must be earned. Well, I absolutely love reading words like that on a daily basis. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me inspired, keeps me focused. And so I'm glad I could share that with you. While I'm reading some things from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, I want to tell you that my friend Don Green that I've just mentioned, he wrote the foreword to my book, From the Lip to the Hip is a Pretty Far Distance, Doing What You Say You're going to Do, Lessons in Character and Integrity. And that book came out on December 22nd. It took me a lifetime to write it. I'm going to tell that story in a moment. But Don Green wrote the foreword to that book. What a great honor for me. But how that happened was almost 9 years ago when I started my foundation. I said, I've been following Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, thinking philosophy my whole life. I think that now that I'm going to be starting a nonprofit foundation, I want to see if I can align myself with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. They're in Wise, Virginia, which is right there where Napoleon Hill was born, in Pound, Virginia. And I called the number. I Googled it and called the number. And Don Green, the executive director, answered the phone himself. And I was really impressed that a worldwide organization like that, it's been around for 75 years or so, promoting the works of Napoleon Hill, his philosophy of make the world a better place in which to live. He answered the phone himself, Don Green. And we became very close from that moment on. When I told him that what I was going to be doing, going into prisons and trying to help people find their purpose and have a better life, he said, that's a really great thing to do. And he said, we used to do that a whole lot more in the foundation, but we haven't done it that much lately. And he sent me a book, My Shadow Ran Fast, by a gentleman named Bill Sands. And that was the first book that I was gifted from the Napoleon Hill Foundation. He's probably given me 50 since then. And he's probably given me a couple hundred that I've donated into prisons and to programs that I've done in schools. But Don Green is just a wonderful man. And I thank him for being in my life. He's got a book that's going to be coming out at the end of January. It's called Napoleon Hill, My Mentor, Timeless Principles to Take Your Success to the Next Level, by Don Green, CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And I'd like to read the blurb on that's on the internet. Napoleon Hill, born in the Appalachian town of Pound, Virginia, is best known for his world-renowned bestseller, Think and Grow Rich, among the 10 top-selling self-help books of all time. It contains many of the success secrets he learned as a result of a commission from Andrew Carnegie to write the world's first philosophy of success. Don Green, the son of a coal miner who was also born in Appalachia, Don always had an entrepreneurial streak and had many business successes. At 41, he became the CEO of a bank on the verge of collapse, running it at a profit for the next 18 years. He was 60 when it was sold, and Don was asked by the trustees of the Napoleon Hill Foundation to become their executive director. With his love for books and learning, particularly the works of Napoleon Hill, Don took the foundation's work to a new level of success. Don succeeded by applying the principles that his mentor, Napoleon Hill, taught. In this book, you'll develop a deeper understanding of both these outstanding individuals and learn the principles of success that made Hill famous. Don's personal knowledge of Hill, including stories and insights that haven't been published before, the principles behind Think and Grow Rich and why they're relevant today, how to put the power of Napoleon Hill to work for you, tools to uncover the secrets of growth, creativity, power, and achievement inside you. Get ready to apply Hill's time-tested tools for success and make your dreams a reality. Napoleon Hill's principles are fabulous. They're very, very They cover everything, I believe. There's basically 17 principles of success. And one of the top 5 of his principles, they're called the major principles, is definiteness of purpose. And it's all about, you've got to know your purpose. And so if you haven't picked up anything at all from me in the 202 episodes that we've been broadcasting for close to 4 years, you've got to know your purpose. You've got to find your purpose, because if you don't, you're going to just be drifting through life. That's a concept that's presented beautifully in Outwitting the Devil. One of the other principles that is so important to me, it's called the mastermind group. And that's where you surround yourself with people that genuinely care about you and you care about them. And it's amazing how when you work with people that care about you, that you care about, how much gets done. You can benefit from others. Now, that's going to lead me right into one thing. Reading. Reading is, in my mind, one of the greatest secrets, fundamental principles of having a good, successful life. When Jim Stovall, who I was introduced to by Don Green, when Jim Stovall was on my 200th show a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, this was the 202nd show, we talked about reading. He's listened as a blind man. He's read books through listening to them more than anyone I've ever met in my life. He's probably up to about 9,000 books. He does a whole book every single day. But when I asked him, well, how do you, being a man that's in such incredibly high demand in this world where people want something from you, everybody wants something from you. You know, he's one of the world's most important platform speakers. Has 5 million people a week follow him. I did a whole show with him on a book that he wrote, Ultimate Hindsight, which I think is just successful. I said on that show, I think if somebody read this book 30 times, read it or listen to it 30 times, and the principles and the stories that all of the people that he interviewed on what they look at life and what they attribute their success to, some of the most famous people in the world. We did a full show on that book, The Ultimate Hindsight. I said, I'm going to read that book 30 times. I'm on my 8th time. I'm just about finishing my 8th time through it right now over the last 2 weeks. I listen to it all the time when I'm driving or hiking or whatever. But feeding your brain with this kind of stuff. But the point I'm making is some of the most wonderful mentors that we can have are people that we meet in a book. He actually said on that show, Jim Stovall, that we've both met Napoleon Hill. What he meant was we've both met Napoleon Hill through reading his works. Another thing that Jim Stovall said after the show when we were just having conversation, when a person's a speaker like Jim does or like I do on these shows, he said, you're not getting the best of that person. You're getting good stuff from a person that's a professional speaker, a motivational speaker. But when a person writes a book, like Jim Stovall said, that his best stuff is when he writes a book and he goes through the edits and he makes sure that every thought is presented exactly the way that he would like to, that it's not just kind of like sort of put out there in a conversation. I've learned a great deal the last 6 months about the difference between conversational dialogue and the written word in a book, because my book, From the Lip to the Hip, is a pretty far distance. It was done off of 13 radio shows where I created transcripts, and then we edit the transcripts down and then made them read a little bit better, because I saw the differences in conversational dialogue when it just flows. But I've learned a lot, and I thank Jim Stovall for all his mentoring along the way. Don Green wrote a book called Everything I Know About Success I Learned from Napoleon Hill. And I've been through that book about 6 times now, and it's a wonderful book. We can learn so much from others and mentors that we all need. You don't have to have somebody that's a person to mentor you. It's great if you can, somebody that you can grow up or somebody that you can respect to mentor you if they're willing to. But there's so many good works out there. I Googled something for today's show that I think is just really a beautiful thing. It's 25 quotes on getting back up. And so here's the flavor of what today's show is all about. When you're going through a hard life and when you're beaten down rather, I think it's incredibly important to not give up, Believe that you're going to be able to get through this. And the more times you get up, the more experience you get, and knowing that it's not the worst thing that ever happened to me. I've been through some tough stuff before, and I'm gonna be able to overcome this. One of the things that I try to tell people in my curriculum for personal finance and small business ownership is I try to teach how money really works in a person's life, so that when they have a financial setback, they'll be able to deal with it and be less distracted, so they can deal with the other things in life that we have no control over. Accident, job layoff, maybe a divorce or things of that nature. So let's eliminate as much as we can with the stresses that finances create in our life, get on top of our finances so that we take that off the table as being a major stress factor, and then we can deal with things in a better frame of mind. When someone's under pressure, they sometimes make bad decisions. And so that's my lessons on being able to reduce stress from finances. So what we don't want to do in life is have something that should have been no more than a temporary setback and have it turn into a major failure. And when you get real good at what I just said, there is nothing in life that is a major setback that should become a failure. There's nothing that you won't be able to overcome. And I got a couple quotes here that are going to reinforce that for you, and I'll stop on one in particular. This came from a www.azquotes.com. It's a fantastic website. I'm going to read these. They're all public domain quotes. So let's start off with our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. That's Confucius. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. That's Winston Churchill. If life knocks you down, try to land on your back, because if you can look up, you can get up. And if you can get up, you can stand up. And if you can stand up, you can fight for your dream once again. You have something special. You have greatness within you. That's by Les Brown, just a phenomenal motivational speaker. Here's another one. It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. That's Vince Lombardi. Some of the ones I'm going to read you now say the exact same thing, but they're quoted by other people. We'll go on to it in that in a minute. I'll point it out. Here's one of my favorites, though. No matter how many times you get knocked down, keep getting back up. God sees your resolve. He sees your determination. And when you do everything you can do, that's when God will step in and do what you can't do. That's Joel Osteen. You may not be responsible for getting knocked down, but you're certainly responsible for getting back up. That's Wally Amos, famous for the Amos chocolate chip cookie. Famous Amos. Everybody falls down. Getting back up is how you learn how to walk. That's Walt Disney. There is no shame in falling down, but there is pride in getting back up. Lily Singh. It's not the failures in our life that define us. It's the moments when we decide that getting back up is all that matters. Joel Brown. As long as you've done your best, making mistakes doesn't matter. You and I are human. We will mess up. What counts is learning from your mistakes and getting back up when life has knocked you down. Sean Johnson. If you're going through hell, keep going. That's Winston Churchill, and I always share the second half that very few people have ever heard. And the second verse of that is, and when you're going through, and you'll get, let me start over the beginning. If you're going through hell, keep going, and you'll get through it so fast the devil won't even know you've been there. That's pretty positive stuff there. The best part of falling is getting back up again. David Bell. Getting knocked down, get knocked down, get back up. Always be a fighter. Don't be afraid of the punch. Don't be afraid of getting back up. Be afraid of giving up. I skipped one. Sometimes good things fall apart, so better things could fall together. And that's everybody's favorite movie star from the old days, Marilyn Monroe. You can't lose confidence in yourself, or you've lost already. When you get knocked down, you've got to keep getting back up. That's Tim Tebow. One I read a moment ago, I didn't tell you who said it. I'll read it again. Get knocked down, get back up, always be a fighter. Don't be afraid of the punch. Don't be afraid of getting back up. Be afraid of giving up. Maria Kanellis. Everybody at some point in their life has fallen down and not felt like getting back up. But you have to, no matter how difficult it is. Charlie Hunnam. It's about getting able to go through the grind, willing to get back up when you're knocked down. And when life's not going well, not getting down on yourself and just getting back up and getting back to work and striving to be the best you can be. Robbie Lawler. Fearless is getting back up and fighting for what you want over and over again, even though every time you've tried before, you've lost. That's some wisdom from Taylor Swift. No matter how many times you get knocked down, keep getting back up. Another one by Joel Osteen. If you can look up, you can get up. That's Eric Thomas. When life knocks you down, try to land on your back. That's a repeat. I said that already, because if you can look up, you can get up. Let your reason get you back up. That's Les Brown, slightly different from the first one that I read. Falling and getting back up is what brings you success. Tony Horton. When you get knocked down, don't stay down. Get back up. Nothing good is going to happen as long as you're down on yourself. That's another one from Joel Osteen. Trying to be the best, failing, get back up. Those characteristics are going to allow you to make great decisions. They're going to allow you to compete. They're going to allow you to achieve your best. That's the American dream. Ronnie Lott. Ronnie Lott was a football player, a linebacker, if I remember, for the San Francisco 49ers. We're none of us quite so sure of our place in the world that we can't be rocked off our feet by bad times. It's the getting back up again that counts. Not that you fall, but getting back up again counts for more in the long run. Mercedes Lackey. Life is easy when you're hot, but what happens when the ball bounces the other way? You just keep getting back up and climbing up. Bill Walton. It's all about getting back up and getting back to work and striving to be the best you can be. That's Robbie Lawler again. There will always be bad times. It's the getting back up again that counts. Mercedes Lackey. It's about falling down and getting back up. Robbie Lawler. Get back up when you're knocked down. Robbie Lawler. And the last one that I have for you here, sin and forgiveness and falling and getting back up and losing the pearl of great price in the couch cushions, but then finding it again and again and again. Those are the stumbling steps to becoming real. The only script that's really worth following in this world, or the one that's coming. Brennan Manning. I read all those specifically because we're all going to have hard times. We're all going to have misfortunes. We're all going to have setbacks. But if we believe that we are able to just trust in the Lord, we will be able to ride it out, ride the storm, and we will end up in our destiny. For the third time in this show, I'll say the same thing that I said earlier, that I was told by Johnny Lloyd. And that is that our history unwraps our destiny. Let your destiny be something that is good, and not give up because it's hard, because it's tough. If you get into such things as the Napoleon Hill principles, you will learn how many, many things fit together. It's not always so easy. Some people think it's going to really, really be easy. It's not going to be easy. I want to go back to one of the greatest things in my childhood that I came out of that has like a 50-year story behind it. And that is, when I was about 10, 12 years old, I had neighbors across the street, Mr. and Mrs. Sproul, and they were basically my adopted grandparents when I was a kid. They were very old at the time. Mrs. Sproul lived to be 102. She died about 20 years ago, so she'd be about 120. So that's a long time ago. But I spent a lot of time over the Sprouls, and I learned a lot. We read a lot of scripture. And one of the things that I learned while I was over there was a little poem that that I made as part of my life journey, and it goes like this: the Lord works in mysterious ways; His wonders never cease. He sets His feet upon the sands and sails upon the seas. Well, I never found out where that came from. And so, being the person that I am, where I like to meet people and start up a conversation and just sort of get to know people, I must have asked 1,000 people if they had ever heard that before. And most people had. And I asked them, but where did it come from? I know it's in the Bible, but I don't know where. Well, I got every answer imaginable about, well, it's not really just a straight piece of scripture. It's kind of a combination of different pieces of scripture. And I had some very learned pastors and rabbis try to point me to where it probably came from. Well, when Don and I, for our first anniversary, we've been married 17 years, so this was 16 years ago, I surprised her with a cruise to Alaska on a Christian cruise that was the Charles Stanley Christian cruise. And we were the youngest people on that cruise ship. And we sat at a table with a lot of people that were a bit older than us, and had our meals and had great conversations. And one day I asked these other 8 people that were sitting at this large table, did they know where this came from? And nobody did. But a woman sitting right at the table next to us called me over, and she said, I know where that came from. So I went over to her, and she said, it's not exactly the way that you say it. It's really God moves in a mysterious way. She said it's a 1773 hymn written by a man named William Cowper, C-O-W-P-E-R. And I said, really? And she said, yeah, you almost have it. Your version's really much what it says, but you should research that. So, I'll say mine again right now, just so you'll see the difference. The Lord works in mysterious ways. His wonders never cease. He sets His feet upon the sands and sails upon the seas. Well, here's William Cowper's original in 1773. God moves in a mysterious way, His wonders to perform. He plants His footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm, deep in unfathomable minds of never failing skill. He treasures up His bright designs and works His sovereign will. Ye faithful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy and shall break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust Him for His grace. Behind a frowning providence, He hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding ever hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. Blind unbelief is sure to err and scan His work in vain. God is His own interpreter, and He will make it plain. That has been with me my whole life for 60 years, give or take, and I love every word of it. And so I want to close today's message with just a couple thoughts. In the last couple months, I have a new relationship with an organization that I've met through Jim Stovall called the Compassionate Samurai. It's the Clemmer Associates Leadership Organization, started by Brian Clemmer, and I've been reading Brian Clemmer's works. Unfortunately, he passed away about 8 years ago. In the book, The Compassionate Samurai is a masterpiece that his leadership organization is based on. And the chapter 9 that I'd like to share with you right now, it's titled Boldness, and it's all about courage. And I want to read you a quote here. I want to read you this quote that says, one isn't necessarily born with courage, but one is born with potential. Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't be kind, true, merciful, generous, or honest. That's a quote that starts chapter 9 in the Compassionate Samurai book by Maya Angelou. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. She's one of my favorite people. Why the Cage Bird Sings is just a masterful book, and I love reading her. And on On a page in this chapter, I selected a paragraph that I want to read that Brian Clemmer wrote. It's in a subtitle in this chapter, How to Win at the Game of Life. You can't win at the game of life trying to shelter yourself from every single hurt that may come your way. Some parents advise their adult children not to enter into a potentially wildly profitable business venture, but to stay on their job for the sake of insurance benefits and a pension that they'll receive in 30 years. Winning at the game of life requires courage to do it. Without knowing all the facts, you have to make decisions from your gut. Trust yourself and trust that God is leading you exactly where you need to go. I'm going to bring today's show to a close with a thank you. In my high school, Granby High School, I graduated in class of 1969. We had our 50th reunion a year ago, October. And a friend of mine from back in high school, Al Hudgens, he took it upon himself with some other people that he recruited to basically keep a Facebook private, whatever you call it, private site for the class of Granby High School 69ers. And it is just such an incredible way to reconnect with our high school classmates. But we had a very special class. We all really, really cared about one another back then. And we had a great education. We learned to read. We learned to read so much. And I'm going to slip in this. It's another thought for the day by Napoleon Hill from about a week ago. The mind grows only through use, and it atrophies through idleness. Just as the physical body becomes strong through regular exercise, so does the mind require regular use to remain strong. Make sure that your personal development plan includes plenty of mental stimulation. One of the best ways to develop your imagination and visualization skills is through reading. As you read, your mind translates the words into images that help you better understand the concepts about which you are reading. Become a voracious reader. Read newspapers, trade magazines, self-help books, and novels. All will contribute to your store of knowledge and to your ability to visualize and more effectively use your imagination. I just thought I'd slip that in. So back at Granby High School, we had our high school reunion. Al Hudgens did a masterful job. And I just want to say thank you to my classmates from the class of Granby High School of 69. When I posted that my book was being launched on December 22nd, I've gotten over 45 comments from my high school classmates offering me congratulations for having my book published. And it just made me feel so good because my high school teacher, Mrs. Griffin, she's the one that when I was a senior in high school, she asked me what I was going to do with my life. And she took me out in the hallway. And when I told her I was going to be an accountant, she said, well, Steve, can I just offer you something that I've never known anyone that I could say this to? So do you mind if I give you just a personal piece of advice? Could I share this with you? And I said, oh, I would like that. Thank you, Ms. Griffin. And she said, I've never met anyone like you. I think that you ought to just go out and live life to the fullest, experience anything that comes your way, and just keep living life to the fullest. And when you turn 40, write about it, and you'll have a wonderful life, and you'll be incredibly successful because you have something that I've never seen in someone else that could go out into the world and live like that. Well, I'm here to tell you that I pretty much have done that, not by choice in my early days, but I became a person that was out in the world. I've been to all 50 states. Now I'm starting to go to prisons in all the states. And I just love people and I love life. And I thank my mom for that. And I do thank my dad also for the lessons that he taught me, although they were pretty tough for me. But here's what I want to tell you. The Granby class of 69, y'all are so beautiful. And I thank you so much for the encouragement that all of y'all are giving me and all the other people that have responded to my announcement that my first full book's out there. And a special thanks to all the other 11 contributing authors that are part of the book. But there was one of my classmates, Susan Tillman Hawthorne now, and she sent me a beautiful comment about my book. And she let me know, she congratulated me, but she let me know that she had just written a book. She's written a lot of books, by the way. She's an outstanding writer. And her book is called When Forever Ends. And I got the ebook immediately, and I read it that morning. This was just last week. And I said to her, Susan, I just read your book. It is beautiful. You are a truly gifted writer. I'm so glad that I read it. I will read more of your books. Merry Christmas. And she said, thank you, Steve. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And then I wrote again, I said, Susan, I did. I respect the hard work that you have put into getting as far as you have. You have received some very nice awards. And she responded and she said, Steve, I wanted to write since my mother began reading to me. I'm so happy I have the opportunity to share my words and that others enjoy reading them. Well, Susan, thank you for who you are. Thank you for the book that I read of yours, and thank you for your encouragement. Well, what I want to say to everyone as we close out 2020, it has been an incredibly difficult year for everyone in the world. But I want you to know that I pray for each one of you that your lives will be healthy, that 2021 will be a year of good health, good friends, and happiness and prosperity. But what I really want to say as I close this message, my last one of 2021 or 2020 into 2021, I just want to thank the Lord for giving me the life that he did. I wouldn't have had it. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. And I want everyone to know that I'm here for you, and that ever since my mother told me, Stevie, you're the man of the house now, I've taken responsibility and I've learned to just do all that I can. I've trained myself to do all I can to be available for everyone. And so I'm here for you, rightthink.org. If you want to reach out to me, I'll respond to you. And I would just like to say one more time, God bless each one of you. Thank you for listening to my show. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for letting me be there for you. And thank you for being there for me. God bless you and Happy New Year.